My family abandoned me at 17 with a note saying, "You'll figure it out." Now, I am Fidela, 35 years old now, and this is the story of how I went from finding a note from my parents saying, "You'll figure it out," to becoming a self-made millionaire. The irony is not lost on me that the family who abandoned me now wants back in my life because of my success. I still remember the shock when they showed up at my office after 18 years of silence. Their faces when I served them court papers. Priceless. Before I tell you how I took my family to court, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Before my world came crashing down, I lived what seemed like a normal middle-class life in Seattle. My parents, Martha and David, worked steady jobs that provided enough for our family of 5. I was the oldest of 3 with my younger siblings Jessica and Kyle, completing our supposedly happy family portrait. We lived in a modest 2-story house in a decent neighborhood, and from the outside everything looked perfect. But beneath the surface, tensions had been brewing throughout my high school years. My parents became increasingly distant and critical of my choices. I wanted to study computer science and technology, while they insisted I pursue something more practical, like accounting or nursing. Every conversation turned into an argument with my parents, dismissing my dreams as unrealistic. "Technology is not for girls like you, Fidela," my father would say with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You need something stable, something safe." The summer before my senior year, things got worse. I took a part-time job at a local coffee shop to save money for college, which seemed to irritate my parents further. They complained about my hours, about me not being home enough yet. Whenever I was home, the atmosphere was suffocating. On that day, I had worked a long 8-hour shift. It was a Friday in September, just 3 weeks into my senior year of high school. I remember being tired but satisfied with the tips I had earned. Walking home, I was calculating how much closer I was to affording a laptop for college applications. The first sign something was wrong was the empty driveway. Both my parents' cars were gone, which was unusual for 6 p.m. on a Friday. When I tried my key in the door, I found it already unlocked. Inside the house felt different. Too quiet. Too empty. "Mom, Dad," I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the entryway. "Jessica, Kyle." I walked through each room downstairs, then upstairs, my heart beating faster with each empty space I encountered. Their closets were open, half empty, drawers pulled out with remaining items scattered about. In my siblings' rooms, favorite toys and games were missing. It looked like they had packed in a hurry. On the kitchen counter, I found it. A single sheet of paper with just one sentence written in my father's handwriting, "You'll figure it out. We can't do this anymore." I read it over and over, unable to process the words. What did they mean, figure it out? Figure what out, living alone at 17? It had to be a joke. A terrible, cruel joke. I called my mother's cell phone, straight to voicemail, my father's, the same. Jessica's phone, which she had just gotten for her 14th birthday. Nothing. In a panic, I called my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister who lived in Portland. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice immediately guarded. "Fidela, I was wondering when you would call." "Aunt Linda, my family is gone. The house is empty. Did something happen? Was there an emergency?" The long pause told me everything before she even spoke. "Honey, they moved to Arizona. Your father got a job offer and they decided to take it. Without me, that's impossible. When are they coming back for me?" Another pause. "They're not, sweetheart. They felt you were old enough to be on your own. Your mother called me last week to tell me their plans. I tried to talk her out of it, but you know how stubborn she is." The room seemed to spin around me. My aunt's voice continued saying something about them feeling overwhelmed about financial struggles I knew nothing about how they thought I was independent enough to handle things on my own. I hung up mid-sentence and slid down against the kitchen wall, the note clutched in my hand. Reality hit hard in waves. The rent was due in 2 weeks. The utilities would be cut off if not paid. I had to finish my senior year. I had less than $300 saved from my part-time job, and I was completely, utterly alone. I tried calling my parents every hour for the next 3 days. When they finally answered, the conversation lasted less than a minute. "We've made our decision, Fidela," my father said flatly. "You've always thought you knew better than us. Now you can prove it. Don't call again." I later learned from reluctant relatives that my parents had been planning this for months. They had secretly sold many of their possessions, withdrawn me from their bank accounts, and signed the house over to the landlord in exchange for breaking their lease without penalty. They had calculated exactly how to erase me from their lives with minimum inconvenience to themselves. That night, I cried until there were no tears left. The betrayal was so absolute, so deliberate, that it felt like a physical wound. My own parents had discarded me like unwanted furniture too burdensome to bring along to their new life. And they had taken my siblings, who I had helped raise and care for, without even allowing me to say goodbye. The abandonment was complete. I was 17 alone with nothing but a mocking note that would change the course of my life forever. You'll figure it out. That first week alone in our suddenly empty house was a blur of panic and desperate planning. The landlord called 2 days after my family disappeared, confused about why I was still there when my parents had terminated the lease. I begged him for 2 weeks to figure out my next steps, and reluctantly he agreed. I had exactly 14 days to solve problems most 17-year-olds couldn't even comprehend. Where would I live? How would I pay for food? Could I somehow stay in school and graduate? The questions were overwhelming, but I had no choice but to address them one by one. The morning after discovering the note, I went to school in a daze and asked to speak with my counsellor, Mrs. Williams. In her small office with motivational posters that suddenly seemed like cruel jokes, I broke down and told her everything. "Fidela, what your parents did is not just wrong, it's illegal," she said, her face a mixture of shock and concern. "Abandoning a minor is against the law. We need to contact Child Protective Services." But the thought of entering the foster care system with just months until my 18th birthday terrified me. After much discussion, Mrs. Williams helped me find an alternative. She connected me with a student housing program for at-risk youth that would allow me to finish high school while having a roof over my head. "It's not ideal," she warned, "but it will keep you out of the system and in school." The program placed me in a tiny studio apartment with subsidized rent that I could almost cover with my coffee shop job. Almost, but not quite. So I picked up a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store from 9 p.m. to midnight 4 nights a week. My daily routine became a brutal marathon. School from 8 to 3. Coffee shop from 3:30 to 8. Grocery store from 9 to midnight. Homework until 2 a.m. Sleep for 5 hours. Repeat. Weekends were 12-hour shifts split between both jobs. My grades slipped from A's to B's and then to C's. I was constantly exhausted, frequently ill from stress and lack of sleep, but I kept going. What choice did I have? The one bright spot during this time was my landlady, Mrs. Abernathy, a widow in her 60s, who lived in the apartment across from mine. She noticed my impossible schedule and started leaving homemade meals at my door with little notes of encouragement. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me one evening when she caught me coming home. "Too much pride to ask for help, too much determination to quit. Let me show you how to make a dollar stretch until it screams." Mrs. Abernathy became my first true support. She taught me how to budget my meager income, how to cook inexpensive meals that would last several days, how to mend clothes instead of buying new ones. Simple survival skills no one had ever bothered to teach me. As word spread about my situation, I watched my friends' circle shrink. Many simply couldn't relate to what I was going through. Their concerns about prom dresses and college applications seemed like luxuries from another universe. Some friends tried to help, at first offering couches to sleep on or meals with their families, but teenage goodwill has its limits. Within months, I was effectively alone. That first Christmas was the lowest point. I had a rare day off from both jobs and sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by silence. No tree, no presents, no family dinner. I broke down completely sobbing until my throat was raw. It was the only time I seriously considered giving up, perhaps calling my parents to beg them to take me back. But when I picked up the phone, I remembered my father's cold voice, "Don't call again." Pride dried my tears. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me fail. I would figure it out, not because they told me to, but despite them. Around this time, I received a cryptic text from Jessica. "They won't let us talk to you. I'm sorry, love you." When I tried to respond, the message wouldn't go through. They had blocked my number on her phone. The severing of my last family connection hardened something inside me. I developed a tough exterior that kept people at a distance. Trust became a luxury I couldn't afford. My sole focus became survival and completion of high school. When graduation day finally arrived, I sat among my peers feeling like a ghost. Parents crowded the auditorium, taking photos and wiping proud tears. I had no one. Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Abernathy had offered to come, but both had emergencies that day. So when my name was called, there was no cheer, no clapping hands. I walked across that stage completely alone, accepting my diploma with a hollow smile. After the ceremony, as families gathered for celebrations, I quietly slipped away. Back in my apartment, I changed out of my borrowed graduation gown and went straight to my evening shift at the coffee shop. That night, I returned home to find a small package outside my door. Inside was a used laptop with a note from Mrs. Abernathy. "For your future, I believe in you." It was an older model, refurbished and slow, but it worked, and it would change everything. That night, holding the laptop, I finally accepted a truth I had been avoiding. I was completely on my own in this world. No safety net, no family support, no easy path forward. But for the first time, that realization didn't crush me. Instead, it clarified everything. If I wanted a different life, I would have to build it myself brick by brick. I made a promise to myself that night. My parents' abandonment would not define me. Their note that callous, "You'll figure it out," would become not a curse but a challenge. And I would rise to it in ways they could never imagine. The laptop Mrs. Abernathy gave me opened a door to possibilities I hadn't considered before. While continuing my 2 jobs, I began teaching myself basic web design and programming through free online courses. I would work all day, come home exhausted, and still force myself to study for 3 or 4 hours before collapsing into bed. My first revelation came when I realized I had a natural talent for coding. It was like discovering a language I somehow already knew. Lines of code made intuitive sense to me, and I could visualize solutions to problems in ways that the online tutorials suggested were advanced. Within 6 months, I had learned enough to create simple websites. I printed business cards at the library and began approaching small local businesses, offering to build or improve their web presence for a fraction of what professional firms charged. My first client was a family-owned bakery 2 blocks from my apartment. They paid me $300 to create a basic website showing their products and location. It took me nearly 40 hours of work, making my rate less than minimum wage. But the pride I felt seeing my work live on the internet was worth more than money. Word spread among the small business community in my neighborhood. A florist needed an online ordering system. A used bookstore wanted to showcase rare finds. A pet groomer needed a scheduling page. I said yes to every project, learning as I went, staying up all night to meet deadlines. With my growing portfolio and slightly more stable finances, I applied for a scholarship to the local community college. To my surprise, I received a full ride based on financial need and academic promise. I enrolled in their computer science program, attending morning classes while maintaining my coffee shop job in the afternoons and evenings. During my first semester, I met Professor Larson, who taught Introduction to Software Development. After class one day, he asked me to stay behind. "Your coding solutions are unconventional," he said, studying me with curious eyes. "You're not following the textbook approaches, but your results are often more elegant. Where did you learn to code like this?" When I explained my self-taught background, he nodded thoughtfully. "You have raw talent, Fidela, the kind that can't be taught. But talent without direction can be wasted. I'd like to mentor you if you're willing." Under Professor Larson's guidance, my skills accelerated exponentially. He pushed me to tackle more complex problems and introduced me to languages and frameworks I hadn't encountered in my self-study. More importantly, he helped me understand the business side of technology. "Don't just be a coder for hire," he advised. "Think bigger. What problems can you solve that no one else is addressing?" This question led to my breakthrough moment during a group project in my second year. We were assigned to create a solution for a real-world business problem. While my classmates chose predictable projects like reservation systems or inventory trackers, I noticed something different. The small businesses I had worked with all struggled with the same issue. They couldn't afford the sophisticated inventory and financial tracking software that larger companies used, but their needs were too complex for simple spreadsheets. They existed in a technological gap that no one was filling. Over the next 3 months, I devoted every spare minute to creating a solution. I built a revolutionary app specifically designed for small business inventory management that was powerful enough to be useful, but simple enough that anyone could use it. I called it Simple Stock. When I demonstrated the prototype in class, Professor Larson pulled me aside afterward. "This isn't just a class project, Fidela. This is a viable product. You need to develop this further." After graduating with my associate's degree, I faced a choice: transfer to a 4-year university or go all in on Simple Stock. The safe path would be continuing my education. The terrifying path would be betting everything on my idea. I chose the terrifying path. I moved into an even smaller apartment to cut expenses and quit the grocery store job, keeping only the coffee shop position for bare minimum income. Every other waking hour went into developing the app. I lived on ramen noodles and canned beans, often working 16-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and determination. With a complete version of Simple Stock ready, I began approaching potential investors. The rejections were swift and brutal. Most didn't even let me finish my pitch. Too niche market. Not scalable enough. Too young, too inexperienced. No track record. One investor was more blunt. No one wants to bet on an orphan with no safety net. That particular rejection burned, but it also ignited something in me. I wasn't an orphan. I had been discarded, which was worse. And I would prove them all wrong. Since investors wouldn't take a chance on me, I decided to bypass them entirely. I approached my former clients and offered them free use of Simple Stock in exchange for honest feedback and testimonials. 20 small businesses accepted, and within months, they were reporting significant improvements in their operations. The turning point came when Thomas Delgado, owner of a growing chain of food trucks, called me personally after using Simple Stock for 3 months. "This software has saved me at least 20 hours a week in administrative work," he said. "I need this for all 6 of my locations, and I'm willing to pay. Name your price." I named a figure that seemed absurdly high to me at the time, $5,000 for full implementation, plus a monthly subscription fee. He didn't even blink. Done. And I know other business owners who will want this too. Can I refer them? Within 6 months, I had 30 paying clients. Within a year, over 100. Simple Stock was growing faster than I could handle as a one-person operation. I took a risk and hired my first employee, a customer service representative, to handle the increasing support requests, then a junior developer to help with updates and bug fixes. By my 25th birthday, Simple Stock had evolved into Simple Stack, a full suite of business management tools for small to medium enterprises. I had 12 employees working from a real office space, not just my tiny apartment. The company was valued at just over $1 million, a milestone that seemed unreal to the girl who had once been abandoned with nothing but a cruel note. As the company grew, so did media interest in my story. A local business magazine ran a profile titled "Abandoned Teen Turned Tech Founder," which was picked up by larger publications. I was reluctant to discuss my past, but my marketing team insisted it was a compelling narrative that would help the company. People love an underdog story, they said, and yours is powerful, so I shared it carefully edited to focus on the triumph rather than the trauma. The publicity brought more customers and finally interest from venture capital firms that had previously slammed doors in my face. With my first major investment round secured, Simple Stack expanded rapidly. We developed mobile versions of the software, added advanced features, and began targeting slightly larger businesses. Our user base grew from hundreds to thousands. At 28, I bought my first home, a modest but beautiful 2-bedroom condo with huge windows overlooking the city. After a decade of living in tiny rundown apartments, having a space that was truly mine felt like an unimaginable luxury. More important than the material success was the family I had begun to build around me. Not a family of blood, but one of choice. My employees were more than staff. They were people I had carefully selected, not just for their skills, but for their character. I created a company culture that prioritized loyalty, support, and growth, the very things my biological family had failed to provide. My right-hand person, Bailey, started as my executive assistant, but quickly became much more. She was brilliant, fiercely protective, and became the closest thing to a best friend I had ever had. Where I was cautious and analytical, she was bold and intuitive. We balanced each other perfectly. "You know, normal bosses don't text their employees at 3 a.m. with new feature ideas," she teased me once. "You know, normal employees don't text back with improvements to those ideas," I countered. She grinned. "Guess we're stuck with each other then." It was through Bailey that I met Jordan, who would become another essential person in my life. A software security consultant brought in to strengthen our systems, Jordan was calm, steady, and somehow able to see past the walls I had built around myself. Our relationship developed slowly as I struggled with trust issues that made personal connections difficult. But Jordan was patient, never pushing, always respecting the boundaries my past had created. "I'm not them," Jordan said simply one night when I pulled away after a minor disagreement, afraid it would lead to abandonment. "I don't leave when things get complicated. Around this time, I also began therapy to process the childhood trauma I had suppressed during years of survival mode. It was painful work excavating the layers of abandonment, betrayal, and self-doubt. But it was necessary for me to truly move forward. As Simple Stack continued to grow, we reached a company valuation of $50 million on my 30th birthday. The abandoned girl with a note had built something valuable, something lasting. I had more than figured it out. I had thrived. I had created a new family, one bound not by blood, but by choice and mutual respect. I had built a home both physical and emotional, and I had proven to myself, if no one else, that I was worthy of success, of love, of belonging. The universe, however, has a strange sense of timing. Just as I had finally found peace with my past, it came roaring back into my present in the most unexpected way. It was an ordinary Tuesday in September, 18 years, almost to the day since I found that note. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office when my receptionist called. "Ms. Fidela, there's a family here to see you. They don't have an appointment, but they're insisting you'll want to meet with them. They say they're your parents and siblings." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 18 years of silence, and now they simply showed up at my office. "Tell them I'll be down in a minute." I finally managed my voice surprisingly steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. I took several deep breaths, checked my appearance in the reflection of my computer screen, and walked to the elevator with deliberate steps. Each floor the elevator descended seemed to take me back in time to the 17-year-old girl whose world had shattered with a note. The lobby of Simple Stack headquarters was modern and bright, with our company logo prominently displayed on the wall behind the reception desk. And there they were, 4 people huddled together, looking out of place among the sleek furnishings and busy professionals. My mother hair now streaked with grey, thinner than I remembered. My father stooped slightly, the confident posture I recalled now diminished. Jessica, no longer the 13-year-old girl I had helped with homework, but a woman in her early 30s. And Kyle, who had been just 9 when they left, now a stranger in his late 20s. For a moment, we all just stared at each other. Then my mother stepped forward, arms outstretched, as if expecting a hug. "Fidela, my baby, look at you, so successful, so beautiful." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "What are you doing here?" My father cleared his throat. "We've been following your success in the business news. We always knew you were special, always believed in you." The audacity of that statement sent a wave of nausea through me. I turned to my receptionist. "I'll speak with them in conference room 3. No interruptions, please." I led them silently to a small meeting room and closed the door. They all sat while I remained standing, needing the psychological advantage of height. 18 years, I said quietly. Not a call, not a letter, not even when I turned 18 and was legally an adult. Why now? My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Jessica stared at the floor, her body language screaming discomfort. Only Kyle seemed oblivious to the tension, looking around the room with curious eyes. "We made a mistake," my mother finally said, her voice practiced rehearsed. "We were going through a difficult time financially, emotionally. We thought we were doing what was best for everyone. Best for everyone, or best for you?" I asked, my voice remaining calm, despite the rage building inside me. My father leaned forward. "Fidela, we were young parents. We had you when we were barely 20. By the time you were 17, we were exhausted, broke, and saw no way out. Your mother had a breakdown, we were facing bankruptcy. When my company offered a transfer to Arizona with a fresh start, we made a terrible choice. A choice to abandon your child with nothing but a note saying, 'You'll figure it out.' Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you know what it's like to be 17 and suddenly have no home, no family, no support?" Before they could answer, Kyle interrupted. "Nice offices. Company must be worth, what, 60, 70 million now." That's when I understood why they were really there. It wasn't reconciliation they wanted, it was money. As if confirming my thoughts, my father shifted gears. "We've had our struggles, Fidela. Our business in Arizona failed. We're facing bankruptcy again. Your mother needs surgery we can't afford. We thought as family you might be willing to help us out. A loan or perhaps an investment in our new business idea." The absolute gall left me speechless. I excused myself, walked to the nearest bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and had a silent panic attack. 18 years of abandonment, and they waltzed back expecting financial support. Part of me wanted to call security and have them removed. Another part, the wounded child who still lived inside me, craved their approval even now. I splashed cold water on my face, called Bailey for moral support, and returned to the conference room with her at my side. "This is Bailey, my Chief Operations Officer." I introduced her. Anything you want to say to me can be said in front of her. For the next hour, I listened as they laid out their situation. Their small business in Phoenix had failed during the pandemic. They had mortgaged their house to the limit, maxed out credit cards, and were facing eviction. My mother needed expensive dental work. Kyle had dropped out of college and was living in their basement. Jessica was divorced with financial problems of her own. They wanted $300,000 for family support. "Consider it an investment in your family," my father said, as if that made it reasonable. "We always knew you'd be successful," my mother added. "That's why we knew you'd be okay on your own. We were right, weren't you? You figured it out." That statement ignited something in me. They were trying to reframe their abandonment as some kind of tough love that led to my success, as if deserting their child had been an act of faith rather than cruelty. I agreed to meet them for dinner that evening, partly to give myself time to process, partly because I was morbidly curious about the family that had discarded me. Bailey insisted on joining us for support. The dinner was surreal. At an upscale restaurant I selected, they acted as if we were a normal family having a reunion. They asked surface-level questions about my life, but showed no real interest in the answers. They never once apologized. Instead, they repeatedly emphasized how they always knew I would succeed. The breaking point came when my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Fidela, who figured it out, just like we knew she would. You should thank us, really. If we hadn't pushed you out of the nest, you might never have learnt to fly so high." I set my glass down untouched. "Is that how you justify abandoning your 17-year-old daughter as some kind of favor to me?" "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. "You were always so independent, so smart. We knew you'd land on your feet." "I lived in poverty for years," I said quietly. "I worked 2 jobs while finishing high school. I got food from community pantries. I was alone for every birthday, every holiday, every achievement and setback. Not because I was independent, but because you left me no choice." My father waved dismissively. "And look at you now. Clearly it worked out for the best. I succeeded despite what you did to me, not because of it." Kyle, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "So are you going to help us out or not? We're family after all." "Family." I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't disappear for 18 years and then show up asking for money. I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and looked at each of them in turn. "The answer is no. I won't be giving you money. Not now, not ever." Their reactions were telling. My mother burst into tears, the kind of performative sobbing designed to create guilt. My father's face hardened into the cold mask I remembered from childhood. Kyle cursed under his breath. Only Jessica looked relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, they launched a campaign of harassment. Daily calls to my office. Showing up at my condo building. Contacting my employees through social media. When direct approaches failed, they began reaching out to my investors and business partners, spinning tales of how I had abandoned my struggling family despite my success. The final straw came when my father sent a formal letter claiming he had been an early investor in my business through his emotional and financial support during my formative years. He demanded compensation for this supposed investment, threatening legal action. It was absurd, laughable even, but it was also damaging. Some of my business contacts began asking questions. The story was juicy enough that industry blogs picked it up. "Tech CEO denies family financial support" wasn't the kind of headline I needed. After weeks of escalating harassment, I made a decision that would change everything once again. If they wanted to make this legal, then legal it would be. I sat across from attorney Mariana Reyes in her elegantly appointed office. The harassing letters and emails from my family spread across her desk. She had reviewed everything with a professional detachment I envied, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "So let me make sure I understand correctly," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Your parents abandoned you when you were 17, leaving you with nothing but a note. They had no contact with you for 18 years. Now they're claiming they invested in your future and want compensation for that supposed investment plus additional financial support." "That's correct," I confirmed. "They're saying their abandonment was actually a strategic decision to foster my independence, which ultimately led to my success. Therefore, they deserve a share of that success." Mariana's expression remained neutral, but her eyes flashed with indignation. "Their argument is not only morally reprehensible, but legally unsound. Abandonment of a minor is a crime in all 50 states. Even if the statute of limitations has expired for criminal charges, their actions certainly don't constitute an investment in any legal sense. What are my options? I asked. First, we file for a restraining order based on their pattern of harassment. That gives you immediate protection. Second, we prepare a cease and desist letter regarding their false claims to your business partners and investors. Third, and this is entirely your choice, we can consider a countersuit for the abandonment of a minor. While the statute of limitations has likely expired for criminal charges, civil action may still be possible, especially given their current actions that revive the original harm. I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted this to simply go away. Another part, the 17-year-old girl who still lived inside me, wanted justice. Let's do all three, I decided. I want them to understand that their actions have consequences. Over the next few weeks, we gathered evidence for our case. The original note preserved all these years in a small fireproof box where I kept my few important documents. School records showing my sudden change in financial status and housing situation. Statements from Mrs. Williams, my high school counselor, and Mrs. Abernathy, both of whom had witnessed the aftermath of my abandonment. Financial records showing I had received no support of any kind from my family. As we prepared for court, Bailey and Jordan became my pillars of support. Bailey handled press inquiries with diplomatic skill, minimizing damage to the company's reputation. Jordan provided emotional stability at home, creating a safe space where I could process the resurfacing trauma. The story inevitably attracted media attention. Tech CEO takes parents to court after abandonment, made headlines in business publications and beyond. Public opinion was divided. Some saw me as ungrateful, suggesting I should support my family regardless of our past. Others championed me as standing up against parental abuse and exploitation. The most difficult part of the process was the deposition, where I had to sit across from my parents and siblings while they answered questions under oath. My mother cried throughout, claiming they had been desperate and had no choice. My father maintained they had done me a favor by forcing me to become independent. Kyle appeared bored and disengaged. Only Jessica seemed genuinely affected, unable to meet my eyes. After the deposition, Jessica asked to speak with me privately. In a small conference room, she broke down completely. "I'm so sorry, Fidela," she sobbed. "I wanted to contact you so many times over the years, but they always prevented it. They monitored my phone, read my emails. When I got older and could have reached out on my own, they convinced me you would reject us, that you hated us for leaving." "I never hated you," I said truthfully. "You were 13, you had no choice. They've been manipulating all of us for years," she continued, "using guilt, obligation, financial control. When they found out about your success, all they saw was a solution to their problems. This lawsuit isn't even about reconnecting with you, it's just about the money." Her confession confirmed what I already suspected, but hearing it from her was still painful. It also strengthened my resolve to see this through. The day before our court date, Kyle approached me outside my office building. His attempt at blackmail was as clumsy as it was desperate. "I have evidence that will embarrass you in court tomorrow," he claimed. "Old social media posts where you admitted to illegal activities as a teen. Drop the restraining order and pay what they're asking, or I'll make sure it goes public." It was a bluff. I had never had social media as a teen, couldn't afford a phone capable of it. The fact that he would attempt such a transparent lie showed how little they actually knew about the life I had lived after they abandoned me. Court day arrived with a mixture of dread and determination. I wore a simple navy blue dress and the same small silver necklace I had been wearing the day I found their note. It wasn't a conscious choice, but when I realized it that morning, it seemed fitting. My parents and Kyle entered the courtroom with confidence, as if certain the judge would see things their way. My mother had dressed to appear fragile and sympathetic, my father in his most respectable suit. Their attorney looked expensive, probably hired on contingency with the expectation of a settlement. Their confidence faltered when our attorney presented the evidence, methodically starting with the note itself. Projected on a screen for the court to see, those 5 words, "You'll figure it out," appeared more damning than any argument we could make. The testimony from Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Abernathy, now elderly but sharp as ever, painted a vivid picture of a 17-year-old girl suddenly left to fend for herself. Financial records demonstrated I had received no support of any kind from my family since the day they left. Most devastating was Jessica's testimony. She had decided to tell the truth despite pressure from our parents. She described how they had forbidden any contact with me, how they had rewritten the narrative of their abandonment over the years, to justify it to themselves and others, how they had begun planning to approach me for money as soon as news of my success reached them. As the evidence mounted, I watched my parents' faces change. The confidence gave way to shock, then to something like shame. They had convinced themselves of their own narrative for so long that seeing the reality laid bare seemed to genuinely surprise them. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to both sides without revealing her thoughts. When all testimony concluded, she delivered her assessment with calm precision. The court finds overwhelming evidence that the defendants abandoned their minor child, the plaintiff, when she was 17 years old, providing no financial support, no housing, and no guidance. This abandonment was premeditated and deliberate, not the result of emergency or extenuating circumstances. She continued, "The defendants' claim that they somehow invested in the plaintiff's future through this abandonment is not only legally unsound but morally reprehensible. Their subsequent harassment of the plaintiff and attempts to extract money based on this claim constitute emotional abuse and attempted extortion." The judge granted the permanent restraining order, dismissed their claims against me entirely, and ordered them to pay my legal fees. On the countersuit, she awarded me a symbolic $1 in damages. "No monetary award can compensate for the abandonment of a child," she explained, "but this judgment establishes legally what is already morally clear. The defendants' actions were wrong and the plaintiff owes them nothing." Outside the courtroom, reporters waited for statements. I declined to comment, letting my attorney handle the press. As we walked toward the exit, I passed my family one last time. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother tried to catch my eye, perhaps hoping for forgiveness even now. Kyle slouched away in anger. Only Jessica stepped toward me. "I'd like to stay in touch," she said quietly. "If that's okay with you," I nodded. "I'd like that too." It was a victory legally speaking. The harassment stopped. The false claims ceased. My family retreated back to Arizona, minus Jessica, who decided to remain in Seattle. But the emotional toll was significant. Reopening those old wounds facing my family in court, having my personal trauma become public knowledge, all left me feeling raw and exposed. The legal battle may have been won, but the real healing was just beginning. The months following the court case were a period of profound reflection and healing. Despite the legal victory, I found myself grappling with complex emotions. There was relief, certainly, in having established clear boundaries and legal protection from my family's demands. But there was also a renewed sense of grief for the childhood and family relationships I never had. My therapist helped me understand that these feelings were natural. "Legal closure doesn't automatically bring emotional closure," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "You're mourning not just what happened, but what should have happened, what could have happened in a healthier family." With her guidance, I began the process of truly accepting my past, rather than just surviving it. I learned that strength wasn't about never feeling pain, but about acknowledging it and moving forward anyway. One major decision I made during this time was to establish permanent boundaries with my parents. The restraining order provided legal distance, but I also needed emotional distance. I made it clear through my attorney that I would not be entertaining any further contact from them now or in the future. It was a difficult choice, but necessary for my well-being. With Kyle, the decision was similar. His attempt at blackmail had revealed a character so shaped by my parents' influence that any relationship seemed impossible. Jessica was different. After the court case, we began slowly rebuilding a relationship. It wasn't easy. 18 years of separation had made us virtual strangers. But there was a genuine desire on both our parts to know each other again. "I remember you braiding my hair before school," she told me during one of our first lunches together. "You always made sure I had my homework done and that I ate breakfast. You were more of a mother to me than our actual mother." Those small memories, the confirmation that our childhood connection had been real, helped bridge the gap between us. Jessica had spent years breaking free from our parents' manipulative behaviors, and in that struggle, we found common ground. While working on my personal healing, I also felt compelled to transform my painful experience into something meaningful for others. I established the Figure It Out Foundation, a scholarship and support program for teens who had been abandoned or aged out of foster care. The foundation provided not just financial assistance for education, but also mentorship, housing support, and mental health resources. The name reclaimed those cruel words from my past and repurposed them as a message of empowerment. Yes, these young people would figure it out, but unlike me, they wouldn't have to do it completely alone. I began speaking publicly about family estrangement, a topic often shrouded in shame and silence. At conferences, on podcasts, and in interviews, I shared my story and advocated for better legal protections for abandoned teens. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of people reaching out to share similar experiences. Your story gave me permission to stop trying to fix my relationship with parents who don't want to change, one woman wrote. I've spent decades blaming myself for their rejection, but now I see it was never my fault. These connections reminded me that my experience, while painful, was not unique. There were thousands of others who had faced similar rejection and somehow found the strength to build lives anyway. In my personal life, my relationship with Jordan deepened. We had been dating for nearly 2 years when Jordan proposed during a quiet evening at home rather than some elaborate public gesture. Jordan understood my need for privacy, for safety in our most vulnerable moments. I want to build a family with you, Jordan said, holding the ring. A real one based on choice and commitment and love. The word family still triggered complicated feelings for me. I hesitated, not because I didn't love Jordan, but because the idea of creating a new family terrified me. What if I don't know how to be part of a healthy family? I asked. What if I carry forward the damage they did to me? Jordan's response was perfect. You already know how to create family. Look at Simple Stack, at the foundation, at the community you've built around you. You've been creating family all along, just not the kind bound by blood. You know better than most what family should be because you know exactly what it shouldn't be. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony attended only by our closest friends, Jessica, Mrs. Abernathy, and a few of the teens from the foundation. It was exactly the kind of warm, intimate gathering I had always wanted, but never believed I could have. As my business continued to thrive, I found myself increasingly drawn to work with the foundation. I began mentoring several teens personally, including Maya, a 17-year-old whose parents had kicked her out when she came out to them as gay. I don't know how to do this, she told me. During our first meeting, her voice small but determined. How to be entirely on my own at 17. You don't have to know yet, I assured her. And more importantly, you don't have to do it alone. I helped Maya find stable housing, finish high school, and apply to college. Watching her graduate 2 years later, accepted into her dream university with a full scholarship, brought me a sense of fulfillment that even my business success couldn't match. As the foundation grew, I expanded our programs to include transition housing for youth aging out of foster care. We purchased and renovated a building with 20 studio apartments where young people could live affordably while attending college or beginning careers. Each resident received mentorship, financial literacy training, and community support. The day we opened the building was one of my proudest moments. Mrs. Abernathy, now in her 80s, cut the ribbon. Seeing her there, the woman who had left meals at my door and given me my first laptop, brought my journey full circle. You did more than figure it out, she whispered as she hugged me. You figured out how to help others do the same. That evening, I sat alone in my office, reflecting on the long, difficult road from that abandoned 17-year-old to the person I had become. The note that had once devastated me now seemed almost like a strange gift. Those 5 cruel words, "You'll figure it out," had indeed become my superpower. I had learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice, about showing up for people consistently, about creating spaces where everyone belongs. My chosen family, the one I had built person by person over the years, had given me what my biological family never could: unconditional acceptance and support. The peace I had found wasn't about forgiveness in the traditional sense. I hadn't absolved my parents of responsibility for their actions. Rather, I had reached a place where their approval or love no longer mattered to my sense of worth. I had proven to myself, to them, and to the world that I was worthy of success, of love, of belonging, regardless of their rejection. The family who abandoned me gave me nothing but a note. The family I chose gave me everything, and that's something money can never buy. No matter where you come from or who has rejected you, you have the power to define your own worth beyond others' abandonment. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone who should have been there for you walked away? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with family rejection know they're not alone. Remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with family rejection know they're not alone. Remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story.